record our guest teacher. Does anybody have a pressing question for Gatsby? See, I can do something. Okay, pay attention. I know students don't like to be called out publicly, so I can go to Google Classroom on a secondary device that I have right here, and I can look at your Gatsby questions without revealing the question, without revealing the person's name if they're embarrassed. So let me look here. And I would never call out your name. I don't do embarrassing. Okay, let's look here. Who had a question for Gatsby? All right, let me see here. I'm just going to pick the first one. Okay, this one is notes, good, with the eugenics. We're going to get back to that. Listen, let me try one more until I actually get a question mark, because right now I'm just, oh, here it goes. Oh, okay. What does parcel mean? In the very first chapter, Gatsby's father says that the fundamental decencies of life are parceled out unequally at birth. That's an exact quote. So let's look at this. I swear to God, if I ever get this right, I need to get into a new Word document. Okay. I'm going to go to a Word document now. Alexis, I need you to say, Mr. Edwards, I can hear you.
Mr. Edwards, I can hear you.
Okay. Let's take a moment here. First of all, you don't ever want to rush. You don't ever want to be impatient. You just need to savor life. Now, you can tell that I'm rushing because I'm trying to make up for the last hour. But now I'm calming myself down, and I'm going to commit to an hour of learning on a beautiful day so I can feel a sense of accomplishment. Now, one of our students, he says, what does parcel mean? So the very first thing, of course, you're going to learn is words in context. There's nothing more important than that. So here's the sentence. The fundamental, I'm going to make it larger. The fundamental decencies of life are parceled out unequally at birth. That's his father's quote. You can already tell that that's a verb. Now, I can't see you while I'm on the Word doc, because normally in the classroom I would say, find the meaning of the word in context. The fundamental decencies, the quality of life is parceled out unequally at birth. So maybe I would be like this. The fundamental decencies are distributed unequally. The fundamental decencies are given unequally. The fundamental decencies are promoted unequally. So in context, parceled out means distributed, given. Not because remember the premise, not everybody has had the same advantage as Nick. So the premise is that life is parceled out unequally, which is the rich-poor gap, and plus the great divide between the races. So there's other questions there. I'm going to come back to you now. So you just got your first taste of summer words in context. I could do a lot more there, but we're chasing time. Okay, now Let's go to chapter 2. I talked to one of your parents yesterday by email, and they said, should they buy the book? Yes, you can go buy the book. You start your class library. Start your class library. You can also get the book online for free as an ebook, which is what I'm doing. So if you want to find the book that I'm reading, you Google Great Gatsby, and then you scroll. It depends on what device you're on. On this device, it's usually the second page, until you get a book service called Planet Books. And Planet Books, right there, The Great Gatsby - Planet ebook has been published free of charge. And there she is in all her wonderful glory. Now, chapter 2. And I know you're going to be attentive because I know it's good. So chapter 1 ended about page 26. And I'm going to say something. I'm going to close my bedroom door. I'm in a guest bedroom, not my bedroom. I'm going to say something, and I'm going to come back to you. Don't you dare lose me. I want to say something to this class of scholars before we read. The Great Gatsby is the only book that I've ever read in one day in my life. I read it in high school with Father Schuler my sophomore year. Here's the great irony. My parents bought me the book, like one of your parents wants to buy you the book. I had this beautiful 1980s paperback edition. And when I became a teacher at Phoenix, 1 year, I didn't have enough books because people don't return the books. You know what I'm saying? 1 year, I didn't have enough copies for my class. So I went into my library and I gave a student my high school copy of Gatsby, and he never returned it. I read the Gatsby in sophomore year, which is why you're reading it, with Father Schuler. And then when I was a junior in college at the University of Nottingham in Nottingham, England, Sherwood Forest, Robin Hood, I was in the library on a Friday. I was doing a report for a Latin class, whatever. And I was just walking through the library shelves, and Gatsby caught my eye in the fiction department. And I said, oh, yeah, I read that in high school. And for some reason, it was a Friday, too. And I'm in England. You know, I'm like 19 years old. You think I'd want to go out to the clubs, but whatever. I saw the book, and I said, I really enjoyed reading that years ago. I wonder if it... And then I grabbed it, and I went back to my little house with a couple of roommates. And I went back, and I remember, I'll never forget, I laid down in my little single bed, you know, my little college dorm room, and I read Gatsby at about 3:30 in the morning. You could read the book in one day. It's the only book I ever read in one day in my whole life. And so that's why I'm such a big fan of it, because it's so readable. It's just so readable. All right, now let's go back to the Gatsby, chapter 2. So bear with me. Bear with me. I'm always going to recap the previous chapter because we forget. So in chapter 1, and remember, get out your notes. Chapter 2 notes will be due today. And I do like the notes I'm initially seeing. Okay, chapter 2. I'm ready to go. I'm going to close a few tabs. I hope I don't exit out of you. I just want to clean up my... Alexis, you can hear me here, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to close out one meet. I hope I don't accidentally... All right, good. I'm not sure what this is. I'm going to close out that and that. So I just got my Google Meet and Gatsby. Chapter 1, we have a first-person narrator named Nick Carraway. He comes from a wealthy family from Chicago. They owned a chain of hardware stores. He goes to Yale University, which is a very Ivy League college. He meets a man at Yale called Tom Buchanan. Tom's this big, hulking football star who lives for the glory of the past. He's the richest man in the school. He's the richest man in town. Exceedingly arrogant. And racist. And sexist. But Nick, see, this is what you have to get. You get this, and you can say, I read Gatsby. You don't get this, then you can't say you read Gatsby. Nick says something that nobody ever says. Nick says, I'm going to reserve judgment. In other words, pause. I'm not going to judge other human beings. Very hard to do. Number one, we're constantly being judged. Number two, we're constantly judging others. But Nick says, I'm just going to tell it like it is. I'm not going to interfere. Here's the great irony. These are despicable characters that should be judged harshly, certainly by history. So there's Nick and his cousin Daisy, who's married to Tom, and their friend Jordan, who's a professional golfer. Tom and Daisy are in an extremely toxic marriage. Tom grabs Daisy, kind of pull her into the kitchen, and he bruises her hand. And she calls him a hulking brute of a man. And he says, I hate that word hulking. And then she repeats it in his face, hulking, like the Incredible Hulk. And then there's this little baby, which is, she's not really important to the story, but Daisy, who goes out of her way to be a fool herself, who goes out of her way to be stupid, says, I hope my baby grows up to be a darling little fool. The best thing a girl can do is be a fool. So we have two major problems in Gatsby. It was written at a time where there was incredible racism, and I told you how that racism was justified by this science called eugenics, and I saw some of that in the notes. I saw some of you put that in the notes. Well done. But we also have an incredible amount of sexism. Now, I'm going to put a warning out for chapter 2. I know you are, I know you were all tough city kids. I don't know what else. I don't know how to word it. But there's going to be serious domestic abuse in chapter 2. I'm telling you now. All right. Chapter 2. Make sure you have your notes ready. I'll get you out of here in 45 minutes. About halfway between West Egg and New York, the motor road hastily joins the railroad and runs beside it for a quarter of a mile, so as to shrink away from a certain desolate area of land. This is a valley of ashes. A fantastic farm where ashes grow like wheat into ridges and hills and grotesque gardens, where ashes take the form of houses and chimneys and rising smoke, and finally, with a transcendent effort, of men who move dimly and already crumbling through the powdery air. Occasionally, a line of gray cars crawls along an invisible track, gives out a ghastly creak, and comes to rest. And immediately, the ash-gray men swarm up with leaden spades and stir up an impenetrable cloud which screens their obscure operations from your sight. But above the gray land and the spasms of bleak dust which drift endlessly over it, you perceive, after a moment, the eyes of Dr. T.J. Eckelberg. The eyes of Dr. T.J. Eckelberg are blue and gigantic. Their retinas are 1 yard high. They look out of no face, but instead from a pair of enormous yellow spectacles which pass over a non-existent nose. Evidently some wild wag of an oculist set them there to fatten his practice in the borough of Queens, and then sank down himself into eternal blindness, or forgot them and moved away. But his eyes, dimmed a little by many paintless days, under sun and rain, brood on over the solemn dumping ground. 2 points, because it's very confusing if you're not, getting this. The Valley of Ashes, I want you to think about this in terms of metaphor. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to metaphor. Welcome to symbolism. Welcome to your first taste of AP literature. Now, I remember years ago asking Father Schuler, I don't understand what that means. Who is Dr. T.J. Eckelberg? It's a billboard that's on the outside of town about an eye doctor. And the billboard is a giant doctor named Dr. Eckelberg with huge round glasses like an owl. And he's looking over the village. Oh, I get it, Mr. Edwards. All eyes are watching. Oh, I get it, Mr. Edwards. You said to reserve judgment, yet there's a giant billboard with a doctor on it with huge, intimidating spectacles looking down on East and West Egg Village, judging all it sees. I knew you'd get it. I knew you'd get it. And the Valley of Ashes must be a dump, a city dump, where we put all our waste, where we put all the foul smells, where we try to dismiss all of our immoral actions. Let's just put everything in the dump and forget about it. Let somebody else worry about our mess. Let the alley worry about our garbage. Let's just throw it out and move on. The Valley of Ashes is bounded on one side by a small foul river, and when the drawbridge is up to let barges through, the passengers on waiting trains can stare at the dismal scene for as long as half an hour. There is always a halt there of at least a minute, and it was because of this I first met Tom Buchanan's mistress. Remember, Tommy cheats on his wife? The fact that he had one was insisted upon wherever he was known. His acquaintances resented the fact that he turned up in popular restaurants with her and leaving her at a table, sauntered about, chatting with whoever he knew. Though I was curious to see her, I had no desire to meet her, but I did. I went up to New York with Tom on the train one afternoon, and when we stopped by the ash heaps, he jumped to his feet and, taking hold of my elbow, literally forced me from the car. See what a brute he is? He's always grabbing people. We're getting off, he insisted. I want you to meet my girl. I think he tanked up a good deal, got drunk at luncheon, and his determination to have my company bordered on violence. The supercilious assumption was that on Sunday afternoon I had nothing better to do. I followed him over a low whitewashed railroad fence, and we walked back 100 yards along the road under Dr. Eckelberg's persistent stare. I think you're getting it. The only building in sight was a small block of yellow brick sitting on the edge of the wasteland. You remind me, we're going to read a poem called The Wasteland. A sort of compact main street ministering to it and contiguous to absolutely nothing. One of the 3 shops it contained was for rent, and another was an all-night restaurant approached by a trail of ashes. The third was a garage, repairs, George B. Wilson, cars bought and sold, and I followed Tom inside. Tom and Nick are going to a garage, an automotive, an auto body repair shop owned by a Mr. Wilson, and Tom's going to play with Mr. Wilson in a cruel way. The interior was unprosperous and bare. The only car visible was the dust-covered wreck of a Ford, which crouched in a dim corner. It occurred to me that this shadow of a garage must be a blind, and that sumptuous and romantic apartments were concealed overhead, when the proprietor himself appeared in the door of an office, wiping his hands on a piece of waste. He was a blond, spiritless man, anemic and faintly handsome. When he saw us, a damp gleam of hope sprang into his light blue eyes. "Hello, Wilson, old man," said Tom, slapping him jovially on the shoulder. "How's business?" "I can't complain," answered Wilson unconvincingly. "When are you going to sell me that car?" "Next week. I got my man working on it now." "Works pretty slow, don't he?" "No, he doesn't," said Tom coldly. "And if you feel that way about it, maybe I'd better sell it somewhere else after all." I don't mean that," explained Wilson quickly. "I just meant—" His voice faded off, and Tom glanced impatiently around the garage. Then I heard footsteps on stairs, and in a moment, the thickish figure of a woman blocked out the light from the office door. She was in the middle 30s and faintly stout, but she carried her surplus flesh sensuously, as some women can. Her face, above a spotted dress of dark blue crepe de chine, contained no facet or gleam of beauty, but there was an immediately perceptible vitality about her, as if the nerves of her body were continually smoldering. She smiled slowly, and walking through her husband as if he were a ghost, shook hands with Tom, looking him flush in the eye. Then she wet her lips, and without turning around, spoke to her husband in a soft, coarse voice. "Get some chairs, why don't you, so somebody can sit down." Oh, sure," agreed Wilson hurriedly, and went toward the little office, mingling immediately with the cement color of the walls. A white ashen dust veiled his dark suit and his pale hair, as it veiled everything in the vicinity, except his wife, who moved close to Tom. "I want to see you," said Tom intently. "Get on the next train." "All right." "I'll meet you by the newsstand on the lower level." She nodded and moved away from him just as George Wilson emerged with 2 chairs from his office door. We waited for her down the road and out of sight. It was a few days before the 4th of July, and a gray, scrawny Italian child was setting torpedoes in a row along the railroad track. You see, Tom Wilson is this loser mechanic, and Tom Buchanan, the rich, arrogant millionaire, is toying with him that he's going to sell him a car, and he really won't. He's just playing with him. All the meantime, he's having an affair with Mr. Wilson's wife, Myrtle. She literally comes down the stairs of the apartment above the garage, whispers in Buchanan's ear, and then leaves her husband to go have an affair with the millionaire. I told you these were some pretty rotten people. I tried to warn you. "Terrible place, isn't it?" said Tom, exchanging a frown with Dr. Eckelberg. "Awful. It does her good to get away. Doesn't your husband object?" "Wilson? He thinks she goes to see her sister in New York. See, he's a fool. He's so dumb he doesn't even know he's alive. So Tom Buchanan and his girl and I went up together to New York, or not quite together, for Mrs. Wilson sat discreetly in another car. They're on a train going to New York. Tom deferred that much to the sensibilities of those East Eggers who might be on the train. She had changed her dress to a brown-figured muslin, which stretched tight over her rather wide hips. As Tom helped her to the platform in New York, at the newsstand, she bought a copy of Town Tattle and a moving picture magazine, and in the station drugstore, some cold cream and a small flask of perfume. Upstairs, in the solemn, echoing drive, she left 4 taxicabs drive away before she selected a new one, lavender-colored with gray upholstery, and in this we slid out from the mass of the station into the glowing sunshine. But immediately she turned sharply from the window and, leaning forward, tapped on the front glass. "I want to get one of those dogs," she said earnestly. "I want to get one for the apartment. They're nice to have, a dog. You see, Tom keeps an apartment in New York City so he can have an affair with his mistress." We backed up to, that's where they're going, and they're bringing Nick along for the ride. We backed up to a gray old man who bore an absurd resemblance to John D. Rockefeller. In a basket swung from his neck cowered a dozen very recent puppies of an indeterminate breed. "What kind are they?" asked Mrs. Wilson eagerly as he came to the taxi window. "All kinds. What kind do you want, lady?" "I'd like to get one of those police dogs. I don't suppose you got that kind." The man peered doubtfully into the basket, plunged in his hand, and drew one up, wriggling by the back of the neck. "That's no police dog," said Tom. "No, it's not exactly a police dog. said the man with disappointment in his voice. It's more of an Iredale. He passed his hand over the brown wash rag of a back, looked at the coat. Some coat. That's a dog that'll never bother you with catching cold. I think it's cute, said Mrs. Wilson enthusiastically. How much is it? That dog? He looked at it admiringly. That dog will cost you $10. The Airedale, undoubtedly, there was an Airedale concerned in it somewhere. Though its feet were startlingly white, changed hands and settled down into Mrs. Wilson's lap, where she fondled the weatherproof coat with rapture. Is it a boy or a girl? She asked delicately. That dog? That dog's a boy. It's a bitch, said Tom decisively. Here's your money. Go and buy 10 more dogs with it. See, he's ripping off the... Right, okay. We drove over to Fifth Avenue, great little part of town, so warm and soft, almost pastoral, on the summer Sunday afternoon that I wouldn't have been surprised to see a great flock of white sheep turn the corner. Hold on, I said, I have to leave you here. No, you don't, interposed Tom quickly. Myrtle, that's his mistress, will be hurt if you don't come up to the apartment. Won't you, Myrtle? Excuse me. Come on, she urged. I'll telephone my sister Catherine. She's said to be very beautiful by people who ought to know. Well, I'd like to, but... We went on, cutting back against over the park, that would be Central Park, toward the West Hundreds. At 158th Street, the cab stopped at one slice in a long white cake of apartment houses, throwing a regal homecoming glance around the neighborhood. Mrs. Wilson gathered up her dog and her other purchases and went haughtily in. I'm going to have the McKees come up, she announced as we rose in the elevator. And of course, I've got to call up my sister, too. The apartment was on the top floor, a small living room, a small dining room, a small bedroom, and a bath. The living room was crowded to the doors with a set of tapestried furniture entirely too large for it, so that to move about was to stumble continually over the scenes of ladies swinging in the gardens of Versailles. The only picture was an over-enlarged photograph, apparently a hen sitting on a blurred rock. Looked at from a distance, however, the hen resolved itself into a bonnet, and the countenance of a stout old lady beamed down into the room. Several old copies of Town Tattle, that's a gossip magazine, lay on the table together, with a copy of Simon Called Peter, and some of the small scandal magazines of Broadway. Mrs. Wilson was first concerned with the dog. A reluctant elevator boy went for a box full of straw and some milk, to which he added on his own initiative a tin of large hard dog biscuits, one of which decomposed apathetically in the saucer of milk all afternoon. Meanwhile, Tom bought out a bottle of whiskey from a locked bureau drawer. All right, no drinking for you. You're too young. Okay. I'm almost there, sorry. I'm scroll challenged. I have been drunk just twice in my life. And the second time was that afternoon. So everything that happened has a dim, hazy cast over it, although until after 8 o'clock, the apartment was full of cheerful sun. Sitting on Tom's lap, Mrs. Wilson called up several people on the telephone. Then there were no cigarettes, and I went out to buy some at the drugstore on the corner. When I came back, they had disappeared, so I sat down discreetly in the living room and read a chapter of Simon Called Peter. Either it was terrible stuff or the whiskey distorted things because it didn't make any sense to me. Just as Tom and Myrtle, that's Tom and his mistress Myrtle, after the first drink, Mrs. Wilson and I called each other by our first names, reappeared, company commenced to arrive at the apartment door. The sister, Catherine, was a slender, worldly girl of about 30, with a solid, sticky bob of red hair and a complexion powdered milky white. Someday we're going to have to talk about the hairstyling of the bob. There's an incredible race implications to that. I'm going to actually make that a special project. I can't get into it right now, but it was a hairstyle from the 1920s that was very important to both white and black culture and copying culture. It's an incredibly interesting hairstyle that actually has racial implications. I hope we get a chance to study that. Her eyebrows had been plucked and then drawn on again in a more rakish angle, but the efforts of nature toward the restoration of the old alignment gave a blurred ear to her face. When she moved about, there was an incessant clicking and an innumerable pottery bracelets jingled up and down upon her arms. She came in with such a proprietary haste and looked around so possessively at the furniture that I wondered if she lived here. But when I asked her, she laughed immoderately, repeated my question aloud, and told me she lived with a girlfriend at a hotel. Mr. McKee, these are the people coming to join the afternoon party in Tom's apartment in New York. Mr. McKee was a pale, feminine man from the flat below. He had just shaved, for there was a white spot of lather on his cheekbone, and he was most respectful in his greeting to everyone in the room. He informed me that he was in the artistic game, and I gathered later that he was a photographer and had made the dim enlargement of Mrs. Wilson's mother, which hovered like an ectoplasm on the wall. His wife was shrill, languid, handsome, and horrible. She told me with pride that her husband had photographed her 127 times since they had been married. Oh, I hate when I do that. Mrs. Wilson had changed her costume some time before and was now attired in an elaborate afternoon dress of cream-colored chiffon, which gave out a continual rustle as she swept about the room. With the influence of the dress, her personality had also undergone a change. The intense vitality that had been so remarkable in the garage was converted into impressive hauteur. See, all that the author is saying, F. Scott Fitzgerald here, is that Miss Wilson, Myrtle Wilson, Tom's mistress, by day, she's the wife of a loser mechanic who's poor. By night, she's the sophisticated mistress of a playboy millionaire. See how two-faced these folks are? The intense vitality that had been so remarkable in the garage was converted into impressive hauteur. Her laughter, her gestures, her assertions became more violently affected moment by moment, and as she expanded, the room grew smaller around her until she seemed to be revolving at a noisy, creaking pivot through the smoky air. My dear, she told her sister in a high, mincing shout, most of these fellows will cheat you every time. All they think of is money. I had a woman up here last week to look at my feet, and when she gave me the bill, you'd thought she had my appendicitis out. What was the name of the woman? Asked Mrs. McKee. Mrs. Eberhardt. She goes around looking at people's feet in their own homes. I like your dress, remarked Mrs. McKee. I think it's adorable. Mrs. Wilson rejected the compliment by raising her eyebrow in disdain. Oh, it's just a crazy old thing, she said. I just slip it on sometimes, but I don't care what I look like. I'm coming back to you. That's where that phrase comes from. You've all heard that. We all live on planet Earth. I just threw that on when I don't care what I look like. It's from Gatsby. Ah, you know. But it looks wonderful on you, if you know what I mean, pursued Mrs. McKee. If Chester could only get you in that pose, I think he could make something of it. The photographer husband. We all looked in silence at Mrs. Wilson and removed a strand of hair from over her eyes and looked back at us with a brilliant smile. Mr. McKee regarded her intently with his head on one side and then moved his hand back and forth slowly in front of his face. I should change the light, he said after a moment. I'd like to bring you out the modeling of the features, and I try to get hold of the back here. I wouldn't think of changing the light, cried Mrs. McKee. I think it's her husband. Shh. And we all looked at the subject again, whereupon Tom Buchanan yawned audibly and got to his feet. You McKees have something to drink, he said. Get some more ice and mineral water, Myrtle, before everybody goes to sleep. I told that boy about the ice. Myrtle raised her eyebrows in despair and shiftlessness of the lower orders. These people, you have to keep after them all the time. I wonder what she means by these people. You know. You know. She looked at me and laughed pointlessly. Then she flounced over the dog, kissed it with ecstasy, and swept into the kitchen, implying that a dozen chefs awaited her orders there. I've done some nice things out on Long Island, asserted Mr. McKee. Tom looked at him blankly. 2 of them have framed downstairs. 2 what? demanded Tom. 2 studies, pictures of them. I called Montauk Point, the Gulls, and the other I called Montauk Point, the Sea. The sister Catherine sat down beside me on the couch. Do you live down on Long Island too? She inquired. I live at West Egg. That's Nick talking, the narrator. Really? I was down there at a party about a month ago at a man named Gatsby's. Do you know him? I lived next door to him. Well, they say he's a nephew or a cousin of Kaiser Wilhelm. That's where all his money comes from. The first thing you have to know, it's Mr. Edwards talking. Really? She nodded. In order for you to truly appreciate, Alexis, how are we doing? We're about halfway done. We'll get you out of here well before noon today. The first thing you have to know about Gatsby is that he's an incredible man of mystery. You might have missed this from chapter 1, but when Nick, who's Gatsby's neighbor, when Nick comes back on a summer night after visiting with Tom and Daisy and Jordan, remember? He stands out on this front porch. It's like midnight, maybe later. He sees Gatsby staring out on his dock, looking out at the ocean. And then he says, I wanted to go approach him, but then Gatsby mysteriously disappears. Gatsby is the subject. That's right, then he vanishes. Gatsby is the subject of great rumor. He's an incredibly mysterious figure. I'm scared of him. See, I'm scared of Gatsby. I'd hate to have him get anything on me. This absorbing information about my neighbor was interrupted by Mrs. McKee's pointing suddenly at Catherine. Chester, I think you could do something with her. She broke out, but Mr. McKay only nodded in a bored way and turned his attention to Tom. I'd like to do more work on Long Island if I could get the entry. All I ask is that they should give me a start. Ask Myrtle, said Tom, breaking into a short shout of laughter as Mrs. Wilson entered with a tray of drinks, young people. So they're getting wasted. She'll give, not you, don't you dare. You're too young. She'll give you a letter of introduction, won't you, Myrtle? Do what? She asked, startled. You'll give McKee a letter of introduction to your husband so we can do some studies of him. His lips moved silently for a moment as he invented George B. Wilson at the gasoline pump or something like that. They're basically making fun of Myrtle's husband, the loser husband, whose wife cheats on him. Poor guy, seriously. Catherine leaned close, that's Myrtle's sister, to me and whispered in my ear, neither of them can stand the person they're married to. Okay, so pause. Neither of them can stand the person they're married to. Myrtle, I'm going to map this all out at some point on a character chart. Myrtle is married to Mr. Wilson. Myrtle Wilson is married to Tom Wilson. He's the loser, flunky mechanic. His Daisy is married to Tom Buchanan. Both married couples in Gatsby hate their spouses. The wife hates the husband hates the wife. See, you guys are young. You don't have one of these. Very hard to get these off. And I've said this before. And don't say I didn't tell you. I'm assuming. I don't make assumptions. But I'm guessing I'm the only one in the Google Meets that's married. I'm guessing you're not married. I don't think you are. You listen to me. And this may, 5 years, 10 years down the road, may make the difference. If I had to write a one-sentence thesis about what The Great Gatsby is really about, knowing that it's about everything we've talked about so far, it's a how-to guide of how not to marry the wrong person. It's a guide to marriage. Because we are going to have an intense study of two couples, Tom and Myrtle Wilson and Tom and Daisy Buchanan, two couples that married for the wrong reasons. Long story short, Daisy marries Tom for his money. That's not smart. That's not love. And Myrtle marries Tom Wilson when he's young. He's very, I'm guessing because he was handsome, he just turned out to have bad luck. Neither of them can stand the person they're married to. Can't they? Can't stand them. She looked at Myrtle and then at Tom. What I say is, why go on living with them if they can't stand them? If I was them, I'd get a divorce and get married to each other right away. Doesn't she like Wilson either? The answer to this was unexpected. It came from Myrtle, who had overheard the question, and it was violent and obscene. You see, cried Catherine triumphantly. She lowered her voice again. It's really his wife that's keeping them apart. She's a Catholic, and they don't believe in divorce. Daisy was not a Catholic, and I was a little shocked at the elaborateness of the lie. So don't get confused. Catherine, they're all, Nick. Okay, let's not, because again, we're not in the classroom. You don't have books open. We're not highlighting. You don't have the Mr. Edwards handouts with the character traits. There wasn't board notes behind me. No, I do have a chalkboard downstairs. You know I do. Tom and his mistress, Myrtle, take Nick, the narrator, to Tom's hidden apartment in New York City on Central Park. They grab Catherine, Myrtle's sister, the downstairs neighbor, the McGees, and they start getting loaded on whiskey in the middle of a weekday. And then they start talking like drunk people talk about their marriages. And then it gets revealed that they all hate the people they're married to. And Catherine says, and then Nick says, well, then why don't they get divorced? Talking about Tom and Daisy. And then they say, no, she's a Catholic. She doesn't believe in divorce. But that's not even true. Well, here's the question. And you have 10 years to think about this before you have to actually decide. Why would you stay married to someone you don't love? You see, Mr. Edwards is married. I just celebrated 15 years, June 25th. 15 years. When they do get married, continued Catherine, they're going to West to live for a while until it blows over. I'd been more discreet to go to Europe. Oh, do you like Europe? She exclaimed surprisingly. I just got back from Monte Carlo. They're fantasizing that if they leave their wives, they're all going to hook up with each other and move to Europe and live the high life. Talk is cheap, young people. Talk is cheap. Really, just last year I went over there with another girl. Stay long? No, we just went to Monte Carlo and back. We went by way of Marseille. We had over $1,200 when we started, but we got gypped out of it all in 2 days in the private rooms. We had an awful time getting back. I can't tell you, God, how I hated that town. Me too. When Mr. Edwards was about 20 years old, he took the night train from Florence, Italy. And I passed about 2 a.m. through Marseille and Monte Carlo, which are the French Riviera. I could smell it was very wealthy, and I didn't have any money. It was a dirt poor college kid with a backpack and a writer's journal. So I stayed on the night train, and I went to Barcelona, Spain instead. Smartest thing I ever did in my life. Yo soy el maestro de debate. The late afternoon sky bloomed in the window for a moment like the blue honey of the Mediterranean. Then the shrill voice of Mrs. McKee called me back into the room. I almost made a mistake too, she declared vigorously. I almost married a little kike. Okay, I think that's a racist term against Jewish people who'd been after me for years. I wouldn't have said the word if I thought it. I missed that word. I should have censored that word. I knew he was below me every day. Everybody kept saying to me, Lucille, that man's way below you. But if I hadn't met Chester, they'd have got me sure. Yes, but listen, said Myrtle Wilson, nodding her head up and down. At least you didn't marry him. I know I didn't. Well, I married him, said Myrtle ambiguously. And that's the difference between your case and mine. Why did you, Myrtle? Demanded Catherine. Nobody forced you to. Myrtle considered. So now we're going to find out why Myrtle married the mechanic loser Wilson. Let's find out. I married him because I thought he was a gentleman, she said finally. I thought he knew something about breeding, but he wasn't fit to lick my shoe. You were crazy about him for a while, said Catherine. Crazy about him, cried Myrtle incredulously. Who said I was crazy about him? I never was any more crazy about him than I was about that man there. She pointed suddenly. She's pointing to Nick Carraway. She's pointing to our narrator. She pointed suddenly at me. That's Nick. Remember, Nick's our narrator. And everyone looked at me accusingly. I tried to show by my expression that I had played no part in her past. The only crazy I was when I married him. I knew right away I made a mistake. He borrowed somebody's best suit to get married in and never even told me about it. And if that man came after it one day when he was out, she looked around to see who was listening. Oh, is that your suit? I said. This is the first I ever heard about it, but I gave it to him and then I lay down and cried to beat the band all afternoon. She really ought to get away from him, resumed Catherine to me. They've been living over that garage for 11 years, and Tom's the first sweetie she ever had. You know, her Tom Buchanan, the man she's having an affair with. The bottle of whiskey, a second one, no whiskey for you, was now in constant demand by all present. They were on their second bottle of whiskey, young people. You know, come on. In the middle of the day, excepting Catherine, who felt just as good on nothing at all, Tom rang for the janitor and sent him for some celebrated sandwiches, which were a complete supper in themselves. I wanted to get out and walk eastward toward the park through the soft twilight, but each time I tried to go, I became entangled in some wild, strident argument which pulled me back, as if with ropes, into my chair. Yeah, oh, I hate when I do that. I hate when I do that. Scroll. Yet, high over the city, our line of yellow windows must have contributed to their share of human secrecy, to the casual watcher in the darkening streets, and I was him too, looking up and wondering. I was within and without, simultaneously enchanted and repelled by the inexhaustible variety of life. Myrtle pulled her chair close to mine, and suddenly her warm breath poured over me the story of her first meeting with Tom. So now we're going to hear how Myrtle and Tom hooked up to have an affair on their wives and husbands. It was on the two little seats facing each other that are always the last ones left on the train. I was going up to New York to see my sister and spent the night. We had on a dress suit and patent leather shoes, and I couldn't keep my eyes off him. That's Tom Buchanan, Myrtle. But every time he looked at me, I had to pretend to be looking at the advertisement overhead. When he came into the station, he was next to me, and his white shirt front pressed against my arm, and so I told him I'd have to call a policeman, but he knew I'd lied. I was so excited that when I got into a taxi with him, I didn't hardly know I was getting into a subway train. All I kept thinking about over and over was you can't live forever. You can't live forever. Yes, you can. I'm telling you, you can. You know you can live forever if you know how. She turned to Mrs. McKee, and the room rang full of her artificial laughter. My dear, she cried, I'm going to give you this dress as soon as I'm going through with it. I've got to get another one tomorrow. I'm going to make a list of all the things I've got to get. A massage and a wave and a collar for the dog and one of those cute little ashtrays where you touch a spring and a wreath with a black silk bow for Mother's grave that'll last all summer. I got to write down a list so I won't forget all the things I got to do. It was 9 o'clock. Okay, class, it's 9 o'clock in the evening. They left on the train at 11 a.m. They've been drinking for almost 10 hours. Almost immediately afterward, I looked at my watch and found it was 10. Now it's 10 o'clock at night. Mr. McKee was asleep on a chair with his fists clenched in his lap, like a photograph of a man of action. Taking out my handkerchief, I wiped from his cheek the remains of the spot of dried lather that had worried me all afternoon, a little bit of shaving cream around his ear. The little dog was sitting on the table looking with blind eyes through the smoke and from time to time groaning faintly. People disappeared, reappeared, made plans to go somewhere, and then lost each other, searched for each other, found each other a few feet away. Sometime toward midnight, Tom Buchanan and Mrs. Wilson stood face to face, discussing in impassioned voices whether Mrs. Wilson had any right to mention Daisy's name. I need you to focus. And this is the chapter that I'm not putting a warning on it. It's a masterpiece of literature. It's in Mrs. Tobias's library. It's on CPS Virtual Classroom. But something's going to happen that is very disturbing on the next page. This is Myrtle saying, "Daisy, Daisy, Daisy," shouted Mrs. Wilson. "I'll say it whenever I want to. Daisy, Daisy." Making a short, deft movement, Tom Buchanan broke her nose with an open hand. "Daisy, Daisy, Daisy," shouted Mrs. Wilson. "I'll say it whenever I want to. Daisy." Making a short, deft movement, Tom Buchanan broke her nose with his open hand. Then there were bloody towels upon the bathroom floor and women's voices scolding, and high over the confusion a long broken wail of pain. Mr. McKee awoke from his doze and started in a daze toward the door. When he had gone halfway, he turned around and stared at the scene. His wife and his Catherine scolding and consoling as they stumbled here and there among the crowded furniture with articles of aid, and the despairing figure on the couch bleeding fluently and trying to spread a copy of Town Tattle over the tapestry scenes of Versailles. Then Mr. McKee turned and continued out of the door. Taking my hat from the chandelier, I followed. I is always Nick the narrator. "Come to lunch someday," he suggested as we groaned down in the elevator. "Where?" "Anywhere." "Keep your hands off the levers," snapped the elevator boy. "I beg your pardon," said Mr. McKee with dignity. "I didn't know I was touching it." "All right," I agreed. "I'll be glad to." I was standing beside his bed, and he was sitting up between the sheets, clad in his underwear, with a great portfolio in his hands. These are pictures he took. Beauty and the Beast, Loneliness, Old Grocery Horse, Brooklyn Bridge. Then I was lying half asleep in the cold lower level of the Pennsylvania station, staring at the Morning Tribune and waiting for the 4 o'clock train. Chapter 3. 4 a.m. They leave West Egg Village, East Egg Village, go taunt the mechanic Wilson, grab the mistress, go to the secret apartment in New York on Central Park, gather the partygoers. In daylight, they've drunk 2 bottles of whiskey. By midnight, Tom and Myrtle Wilson are having a fight over Tom's wife, Daisy, who's back at home doing God knows what, sleeping. And Myrtle says, because they're having this fight, we come in the middle of the fight as if we were dozed off from alcohol and we're waking up, and she's fighting with Tom. "Daisy, Daisy, Daisy." And "Don't you say my wife's name." "I'll say it whenever." And he breaks her nose. You see, and he gets away with it. The sister Catherine's there. The Mr. and Mrs. McKee is there, an older couple. Nick is there. You see, I promised you something. I can only go so far. See, we're starting to get into the realm of like senior year AP literature, critical feminist studies, critical race theory, all this really complicated redefining of literature and all these complicated lenses and point of views. But I promised you, I'm promising you three things. Oh, there's another one. There's more coming. I promised you that we were going to take the most sensitive awareness of racism deeply embedded in a culture of New York City party goers 1922 and sexism by these men that are dominating, and then the sanctity of marriage and the cautionary tale of marrying for the wrong reasons. Myrtle Wilson married her husband, Tom Wilson, because he was a young, physically attracting man who she thought would help her breed good-looking children. She uses the word breeding. And Daisy marries the richest man in town for his money. Only you, I can't tell. It's not my job. I don't have the right to tell you. Only you, when the time comes, can say the reason you are marrying the person you are marrying. If you choose to get married, you are under no obligation to get married. That is a choice that's part of our culture and tradition. A lot of it has to do with religion. I got married in a church. And Alexis, if I promise to get it, hey, listen, stop. Because Mr. Edwards gets on his pedestal. Alexis, if I promise to get everybody dismissed for lunch at noon, can I continue or should I shut you know what up? Because I was about to say something. Do I have your permission to continue?
Yeah.
I need a more enthusiastic yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Let me give you a little secret about marriage. I'm just trying to think, is this age appropriate? But I'm guessing it is. I don't know your personal life so well, but I'm sure there's at least a few of you that may be children of divorce. It happens. My parents separated more than once in their lives. My parents started to separate about 1979. That would have put me about 12 years old. In fact, we have two family homes. Remember I told you I grew up in the North Shore? This very wealthy. I did. I'm not denying it. That we sold that house after my father died, but my parents grew up, raised the children in the North Shore. But when I was just before I was a teenager, my father bought himself his own home, which we still own. We own that house. My brother lives in it. It's about a mile from here. It's in Avondale on the north side of Chicago on Belmont. My father bought a second home, beautiful home, 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom, that he lived in. And he lived estranged from my mother for about 30 years. Here's my point, they never got divorced because my mother was a practicing Catholic and still is. My mother's 85. My mother didn't believe in divorce. So instead of getting a divorce, they separated, and they would only, raise their children, and they had to show up at the birthday parties, but they lived apart. for many years. And my father actually fell in love with another woman, and I actually have a half brother. Um, I have another brother. I have brothers from my mother and father, and I from biology, and I have a brother from a second relationship that my father had. I don't see him anymore because he lives in Eastern Europe. I saw him when he was a little kid. I had to go to Europe. My father moved to. That explains why there's all the Russian stuff. You see, like over my shoulder here, that's a Russian. That's all Russian. You can see it. That's Russian language. That's Lenin, the founder of socialism and the Bolshevik Revolution. My father moved to Europe for about 10 years as part of his international business dealings, and took on a Russian family. And I used to go visit them, but I hadn't seen them in decades. Especially after my father passed away, I lost touch with all that family, and I kind of regret it. But what am I going to do? Number one, you forgive. You forgive your parents and the choices they made. You know they love you, and they did their best to raise you. Um, I always felt, and I'm going to get off my soapbox now. I always felt happier when my parents were apart because then they were happier in their own lives because, quite frankly, they just fought a lot when they were together. Um, um, and again, you're very young. I don't think you're quite thinking about marriage, but again, words to the wise. We are, and we're going to continue to read a story about people who married for the wrong reasons and the consequences of that act. So I guess my advice to you is marry for the right reasons. Marry for love. Now here's what I'm going to tell you. Alexis, so far so good?
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't be Mr. Edwards if I didn't say the Mr. Edwards things that Mr. Edwards is famous for. I just wouldn't be. Um, you're going to want to be in class tomorrow because tomorrow we're going to go to Gatsby's party. I said party. Chapter 3, tomorrow, we're going to introduce more and get insight into Gatsby, the man who gives the title to this novel. And he's going to throw a party for some friends, about 2,000 or 3,000 friends that you're going to want to attend. I'm telling you. I'm not recommending, I'm enforcing. I'm telling you, if you ever do anything, you're going to want to go to Gatsby's party because it's the best party ever thrown. Not even the emperors of Rome knew how to party like Gatsby. So make sure you wear your finest party outfits. And you can drink non-alcoholic champagne like you get, the little kids, the grape juice. I, of course, will be completely sober. I like you, young people. I hope that I'm the right teacher for you. I have one philosophy of teaching above all philosophies. I don't want to be the best teacher. I don't think that's possible. I certainly don't want to be the worst teacher. I want to be the right teacher for you. And then you have to say, am I the right student for him? And I think so far, so good. We're moving methodically. There's a lot that we need to do that we're not doing, but I'm going to repair. It's still day 2. Once we get this first week under our belt, I'll have all weekend to write new lessons. I will be adding poetry. I will be adding vocabulary. I will be taking a more sophisticated look at literature using AP terminology. So don't think that you're like, oh, Mr. Ritter's, it's only day 2. I've got a lot planned. But so far, you're over 40 pages into Gatsby, whether you know it or not, and you're starting to understand, I think, this incredibly complicated novel that represents American values, American dreams, American privilege for those privileged Americans. Okay? Good? Are there any questions or comments? Now, here's what I want you to do. I'm serious now. If you left a comment for your independent read, I'm not going to be able to track that. You go back into Google Classroom and attach, cut and paste, whatever, attach your comments as a Word doc as I showed you. If you have any questions, just email me. I'm pretty good. I return the emails within an hour. And then I will, right after we get off this, I'll post Gatsby Chapter 2 notes, and you continue your notes. There will be progress reports a week from Friday. So we have 10 class periods, then I'm going to give you your grades. So you'll know, because I know, you will get a letter grade here. So until then, just do what I ask, and if you earn the A, I will be happy to give you the A.
Can I still turn in yesterday's assignment? I forgot to turn one in.
Yeah, go ahead. We're being very lenient with the late and tardy work, computer glitches, technicalities, glitches in the matrix. No worries there. Let's just be mature and reliant. Let's be responsible. Let's earn the title honors. Yeah, let me look at the comments. I'll get you out of here at noon. We have 8 minutes to figure out. Okay, yes, I was going to address that right now. Thank you, Elijah. So here's what I'm recommending. Your independent reading, which is specific to Black Lives Matter. Here's what I want. Because the books are of different lengths, I want you to read on your own every day, either before class or after class, but certainly every day for 40 minutes. There's a magic to 40 minutes. "40 minutes a day until you're done. And if you're not, and you have 3 weeks to do it for Edwards, 15 class periods plus the weekends. If you still can't finish by then, I'll give you an extension when I pass you on to Miss Novak, and then I'll continue to monitor that grade. I won't disappear on you. I'm going to be your teacher no matter what. You will know me for many years. Here's what I want to do. I will say starting Friday, maybe this Friday, on Thursday's class, I'll ask for maybe 5 people to present where they're at with their book. You're just going to do a virtual book report. Normally, you'd get a handout. I don't have the handouts. I feel like I want how to. Listen to me very carefully. I'm going to answer Elijah's question. Assuming you're just starting today, because you just selected your book yesterday, you read 40 minutes. Come on, man. You can read 40 minutes. I'm gonna show you some stuff then to make readers of you. You read 40 minutes a day, and that's a magic. I'm telling you, that's magic. You could read 10,000 novels in 40 years if you read 40 minutes a day. You know what people say, and I'm not trying to be arrogant. I'm not Tom Buchanan. Don't you dare put that label on me. But a lot of people, especially when they come into my classroom and see my library, a lot of people say, how did you read all those books? You must be, no, I read 40 minutes a day for 30 years. I always read a little bit in the afternoon. I always read a little bit in the morning. I try to read a little bit at night. I try to just sort of like, sometimes I read while I'm watching TV, and sometimes the book's more important. Sometimes what's on TV is more important. But I always got a book on my lap. Watch this magic trick. Mr. Edwards is never, ever, there's no exception to this rule. I'm never more than arm's length from a book. I'm never more than arm's length. I'm going to show you. At school, and I hope they don't disappear. Sometimes I get nervous, but it is what it is. At school, I have about 25, 30,000 of books that are mine, I own. I have libraries at school you've never even seen. I got libraries and classrooms you've never even been in. At home, I have very rare books, very expensive books. At home, I only have about 4,000 or 5,000 books, and I get the jitters. And when I have less than 10,000 books in my life, because I like variety. Let me show you. I got 4 minutes, Alexis. Let me show you a couple of books that I bet you didn't even know existed. They're right here. They're right here. I'll just show you maybe 2 or 3. Watch this. It's right here. Don't you go anywhere. Look at this. Oh, I know you never saw anything like this. I know you haven't. That's metal. This is a Bible. Gospel of St. Matthew. This is a bulletproof Bible. This was issued to soldiers in World War II, 1941, 42. The soldier would put it in his breast pocket. And if the soldier got shot in the heart, the metal of the Bible became a bulletproof vest. This Bible was issued and signed by President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, FDR. And it says, the White House, Washington, as Commander-in-Chief, I take pleasure in commending the reading of the Bible to all those who serve in the armed forces of the United States. Throughout the centuries, men of many faiths and diverse origins have found in the sacred book words of wisdom, counsel, and inspiration. It is a fountain of strength and now as always an aid in attaining the highest aspirations of the human soul. And this Bible was issued, look at this, handwritten, 1944. It's 2020. 1944, this Bible was given to a very brave and courageous young man who has my admiration and warm friendship. May God bless and keep you safe and return you home to your loved ones. Deepest regards, Elaine Marshall. In 1944, a woman named Elaine Marshall gave this Bible to an unknown soldier. And this Bible came back to America, so you know that soldier lived and survived the war with his little bulletproof Bible. Hey? See? How could there be any questions, right? Don't even tempt me. Don't even tempt me. That's enough for today. Don't tempt me. Don't you dare. We'll be here till 4 a.m. like Nick and and Myrtle and Tom at Tom's apartment partying if you get me on books. All right, here's what I want you to do. Of course, you can do more than 40 minutes, Mauricio. That's just a recommendation. On Thursday, so Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So you could get, there's about 2 hours of reading if you read at the pace I'm asking. On Thursday, I'm going to ask for 5 people to volunteer for Friday morning, either before or after Gatsby. I'm not expecting you to be done with the novel or biography or essay. I'm asking you to present what you've read so far. So, for example, I'm a big fan of Walter Dean Myers, a huge fan. I've read all his works. His brother died in Vietnam, all kinds of great stuff. I'm reading the riots, the riot by Walter Dean Meyer. All I'm asking is that you tell us what your work is, why it's a important reading for the Black Lives Matter curriculum, something about the character and plot, to keep the conversation going for the Black Lives Matter curriculum. To keep the conversation going. And then when it's my turn, I'll present my book. If we get that far, there's a lot of students in the class, but I'll start with groups of 5. You can present it. You can type up a PowerPoint. You can do whatever you want. If you want an A, then you do A work. You want a B, then you do B work. You want a C, then do C work. How do I know the difference? You know the difference. I looked at those notes. I didn't mention names. I didn't call out any names, but I looked at one student. I could tell right away that student's on track for AP Literature. That student's on track for highly competitive college, because I could look at the thought process of that student's notes. It could be you. It could be you. Okay. Have your lunch. Spend 40 minutes on your independent novel between now and bedtime. And then immediately after I hang up, I'm going to post Great Gatsby Chapter 2 notes and just upload by 9 p.m. And then I will see everybody at 9:30 a.m. Tomorrow, you go to the new link, Google Meet, and you click on PMA on. You type in the nickname PMA Honors, small letters. I'll also post that instruction to Google Classroom. If there's a glitch in the matrix, then we will go to plan B, and I will just figure it out through communicating through Google Classroom, but I think it'll work out. Okay, young scholars of literature and Gatsby, I hope you have a great day. Any more questions? Okay, you all have a beautiful afternoon. I'll see you tomorrow morning. Do your homework. Bye, Mr. Edwards. Bye. Okay. Adios. And I'll go post the work. Bye-bye.